Joining me now from Kharkiv, Ukraine, is NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel and former Assistant Deputy Secretary of Defense Evelyn Farkas. She's also the director of the McCain Institute and the former U.S. ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul. So, Richard, you begin us off here. Give us the latest from Ukraine and this move by President Zelensky to say that he is willing to step down.
So President Zelensky spoke yesterday for about 2 hours. He was in a chair up on a stage all by himself. He looked remarkably relaxed, giving what was probably one of the most difficult press conferences of his career, because he had to say to the world, but specifically to President Trump, thanks, but no thanks. We want to deal with the United States. Ukraine wants a security and economic agreement, but not the agreement that President Trump is demanding, which would see Ukraine, which would force Ukraine to set up a $500 billion fund, spending $500 billion to put it into a U.S.-controlled investment fund, effectively, using natural resource revenue from rare earth minerals, from oil, to create this fund, which, as I said, would be completely governed and controlled by the United States. President Zelensky said he wouldn't do that it would take 10 generations for Ukrainians to pay this off, and that it had no security guarantees attached to it, which is the most important thing that Ukrainians are seeking. Because, as you said, they didn't start this war. They've been invaded numerous times. First, President Putin took Crimea, then he took the Donbass, and then he tried to take the entire country. So that's 3 in relative short order. And now Ukrainians want to make sure that if they do sign some sort of peace deal and relinquish territory, you're showing that territory in red, some areas that they may have to give up, that if they do that, they at least will have security guarantees from the United States. But now, as it is, Katie, Ukrainians are potentially facing the prospect of having to give up that territory, which they don't control right now, which is about 20% of the country occupied by Russia, and saddle themselves with a $500 billion debt to the United States that President Trump is demanding. And President Zelensky, in his 2-hour, very awkward address, although I will say he did look pretty calm, cool, and collected during it, said thanks, but no thanks. That price is just too high.
Richard, thank you very much. All right, Ambassador McFaul, let's try to sort this out. Let's talk about the minerals, first off. What is Donald Trump trying to extract out of Ukraine?
Honestly, I don't really understand it. He thinks he's doing the American people a favor by getting the Ukrainians to pay for the aid we already gave them. I just want to remind everybody, the American people did not ask him to do this. The U.S. Congress voted to appropriate this assistance. The President of the United States signed it off. There was no clause saying we have to pay it back. And I'd just like to remind everybody, we have allies, too, who have gone to war with us, who have died with us, by the way, in Afghanistan and Iraq. They have never asked us to repay them. I think what it really is just a political cover so that there might be negotiations that Trump can say he got a great deal. By the way, if they had all this $500 billion in wealth, do you think they wouldn't have exploited it ahead of time already? But tragically, I think President Zelensky eventually will sign something. I talked to many of his senior people in Munich last week. They know they have to do this. They just want to get something in return, just like Richard said. They're not going to sign this if there's nothing in it for the Ukrainian people.
Let me talk about what can happen without the United States, Evelyn. Can Ukraine keep on fighting if it has the support of Europe? Can Europe stick together without the United States?
Katie, the short answer to that question is yes, of course. And Ukraine will continue fighting rather than take some kind of raw deal that requires them to forfeit their sovereignty and get no real security guarantee. And at the end of the day, if there's no real security guarantee, they will have to fight. It will just be a ceasefire. So leaving aside the weird mineral deal discussion, the Europeans are able to provide assistance to Ukraine to continue. They have $300 billion of frozen Russian assets that they can unfreeze and provide to the Ukrainians so the Ukrainians can go on the open market and buy weapons from the United States, from the European countries, and also, of course, start putting some of that money towards reconstruction. But at the end of the day, this is about a compromise, Katie. If the Russians want to keep the territory, Ukraine would have to compromise and say, you can keep the territory that you're holding right now. But if there's a compromise, Ukraine has to get something in exchange. And the thing that they want more than anything else, and they're willing to forfeit their territory and their people for this, is a guarantee that they won't have to fight Russia again.
That's a big guarantee. Let's talk about what's happening at the White House right now. French President Emmanuel Macron is going to arrive there shortly. He's going to have a meeting with President Trump. After speaking with the G7, they're going to meet in the Oval Office and they're going to have a bilat. What is the goal of Emmanuel Macron today, Ambassador?
I think he's going to try to persuade President Trump to stay on the side of the Democrats and not to pivot to the side of the autocrats in this world. I got to say, this is just a really embarrassing, sad day for me as an American. It's the third anniversary of this barbaric invasion of Ukraine. And our president is now siding with the dictator. He's siding with Putin against the will of all European leaders. And I hope President Macron makes that clear. But also, importantly, against the will of the American people. We don't have many polls where you get 80% on one side. You know better than I do about American polling. But 81% in a Quinnipiac poll a few days ago don't trust Putin. Only 9% support the president's view. So I hope with this meeting today, I hope with senators, Republican senators who I know personally, who do not support this pivot to support Putin, I hope there'll be political pressure to stop this bleeding, because this is not in America's interest to capitulate to Putin. It has negative consequences for our security in Europe, but it makes us look weak everywhere, including in Asia, including around the world. We have got to stop this.
Evelyn, can you make any sense of why Donald Trump always leans towards Vladimir Putin? Why he believes him over our own intelligence agencies? Why he believes him over Western allies? Why he's now saying something that is just verifiably untrue? We watched it happen. Russia invaded Ukraine. Why he's now trying to claim that Ukraine started this? Why is he always siding with Vladimir Putin?
Well, Katie, before I get to that, I just want to add to something that Mike McFaul just said, because I just came from Taiwan, and they're incredibly nervous. They think that the next thing is a deal that President Trump might make with President Xi. So the question, your question, why does President Trump want to do...
Reiterating Moscow's talking points, and why does he want to take Russia's side? This autocratic government, which, by the way, has infiltrated our nuclear facilities, our energy facilities. I mean, they are preparing for a war with U.S. Vladimir Putin talks about it all the time, so it's not as if we have to look for. It's not a hidden secret. I mean, the Russians have said out loud they view U.S. as the adversary nation, so it's really perplexing. Can't answer it because I am not. I don't know President Trump. Personally, I have not engaged in a conversation with him, but it is really dangerous because if it's part of a negotiation, it does actually make U.S. look weak, and it does encourage the Chinese, the North Koreans,